The day my sister sent me a photo of my beach house with the caption, "Guess foreclosure worked out for someone." I was sitting in a rented apartment eating boxed mac and cheese. I truly believed the bank had taken everything from me. 2 hours later, my phone rang. A vice president from the bank calmly asked why I had missed a $1.2 million mortgage payment on a house that supposedly didn't belong to me anymore. My name is Lauren Whitaker, and a year earlier my life collapsed. A hard divorce drained my savings. Then I lost my job. I tried to keep the house in North Carolina, the one I worked for, the one that smelled like salt and sunlight, but every bill felt heavier than the last. When the bank notices started coming, I stopped opening them. I was tired, scared, and ashamed. Then my sister Denise told me it was over. She said the house was foreclosed, and that I should focus on starting fresh. When I asked why she suddenly had keys, she said someone had to look after the place. Our parents urged me to let it go, said fighting would only hurt me more. I wanted to believe them, so I did what broken people do. I accepted the story. I packed what little I had and moved into a small apartment far from the ocean. I told myself the house was gone. Until that call. The man on the phone spoke gently, like this was a simple mistake. But his words cut through everything I thought I knew. My house wasn't gone. My mortgage wasn't closed. And someone somehow had stepped into my life and moved into my home while I was drowning. That was the moment I understood. I hadn't just lost my house. I had been pushed out of it. Denise was never cruel in a loud way. She didn't shout or threaten. She simply took, smiled, and acted like it was normal. Growing up, everyone said she was the strong one, and I was the soft one. If something went missing, it somehow ended up with Denise. If I complained, I was told not to be dramatic. When I was 16, she borrowed my college savings for a few weeks. I never saw that money again. When I bought my first car, she drove it more than I did. When I finally said no, she laughed and told me I was selfish. Our parents always found a way to excuse her. That's just how Denise is, they said. I learned to stay quiet. Even my losses became her chances. When my marriage failed, she said it was proof I was too emotional. When I lost my job, she told people I wasn't built for pressure. Every time something fell apart in my life, Denise stepped forward like she had been waiting for the space I left behind. So when the house disappeared, part of me didn't fight. I was tired. I had no energy for another battle I was expected to lose. Denise said the foreclosure was unfortunate, but also practical. She said someone had to take responsibility. And somehow, that someone was always her. But after the bank's call, memories began lining up in my mind. The way she asked about my payments months before. How she offered to help with paperwork. How quickly she had keys in her hand. It felt less like bad luck, and more like a pattern I had ignored my whole life. For the first time, I asked myself a question I was afraid of. What if my house wasn't taken by chance? What if Denise took it, just like she always took everything else that was mine? I met Harold Kempner in a small office that smelled like paper and coffee. He spoke calmly, like what he was about to tell me was ordinary. But nothing about it felt normal to me. He said the foreclosure on my house was never completed. The process had started, yes, but it was stopped in the middle. Payments that should have gone to my mortgage were rerouted. Notices were marked as resolved when they were not. Documents had been changed. Signatures were corrected. Not by the bank. By someone else. I asked him what that meant in plain words. He looked at me carefully and said, "Someone interfered." My hands shook. I had spent months believing I failed. I thought I lost the house because I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, or fast enough. I blamed myself for every missed payment, every late notice. But Harold showed me the records. My name was still on the loan. My credit had been damaged, but not by simple debt. It was damaged because someone moved money and changed files behind my back. He told me the person had access to my information. Bank numbers, old emails, copies of documents. Not a stranger. Not a hacker. Someone who knew my life. I felt cold all over. I thought about the weeks I was in the hospital, weak and unfocused. I remembered Denise offering to help with my bills. I remembered her asking for my login details just in case. Suddenly, everything made sense in a way that hurt worse than losing the house. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a system mistake. This was someone stepping into my life, changing my future, and letting me believe I had destroyed myself. For the first time, I understood that my credit wasn't ruined by failure. It was damaged by betrayal. I drove to the beach house without calling anyone. My hands were tight on the wheel the whole way, my chest heavy with things I did not want to believe. When I pulled into the driveway, my name was still on the mailbox. That small detail almost broke me. I knocked. The door opened, and there was Denise, barefoot, holding a glass of wine, sunlight behind her like she belonged there. She smiled like nothing was wrong, like I was a guest. I stepped inside and felt the shock all at once. My couch was gone. My table was gone. The walls were bare where our family photos used to hang. Everything that said Lauren had been erased and replaced with things that felt like I had walked into someone else's life. I asked her what she was doing in my house. She shrugged and said, "You abandoned it." Her words landed hard. Abandoned. As if losing everything meant I chose to leave. As if pain meant permission. I walked into the kitchen, trying to breathe. I opened a drawer to steady myself, and there it was. Bank mail. My name. My address. Notices I had never seen. I held the envelope in my hand. Denise followed me, her voice suddenly sharp. She told me to put it back. Told me I was overreacting. Told me it didn't matter anymore. But it mattered. She wasn't just living in my house. She was hiding parts of my life from me. While I thought I had lost everything, my letters were sitting in her kitchen. I looked at her then, really looked. This was not care. This was control. And I finally understood. I hadn't walked into my old living room. I had walked into the center of my sister's lie. I didn't confront Denise again. I didn't cry in front of my family. I did the one thing I had never done before. I stayed quiet and went to a lawyer. Her name was Monica Reyes. She was calm, soft-spoken, and very precise. She didn't react with shock or anger. She simply asked for documents. Bank letters. Old emails. Hospital records. Every paper connected to my house. We sat across from each other in a small office. I told her everything, from my divorce to the day I saw my mail hidden in Denise's kitchen. Monica listened without interrupting. Then she began lining up the files. What she found made my stomach drop. There were authorization forms I had never signed. Requests sent in my name that I had never written. A power of attorney document that allowed limited control over my finances. Dated during the weeks I was hospitalized and heavily medicated. Denise had temporary access. Just long enough. Monica explained it in simple words. Someone had used my condition to move money, change communication, and step into decisions that only I was allowed to make. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was fraud. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. It looked like mine at first glance. But it wasn't. For a moment, I felt the same shock I felt when I lost the house. But something had changed. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. This time, I wasn't collapsing. I wasn't begging anyone to listen. I was watching, learning, and letting the truth settle into place. Monica didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "We can fix this. But we do it quietly." I nodded. For the first time since everything fell apart, I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing my next move. And I would not make it in anger. I would make it with precision. I did not go back to the house. I did not call the bank again. I did not confront Denise. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I let her believe she had won. When she called, I answered softly. I told her I was tired. I said I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. I even apologized for making things hard. My voice sounded small, and that was exactly what she wanted to hear. Denise relaxed. She began to talk more than she should. She told me how stressful it had been fixing the house. She joked about how complicated paperwork could be. Once she laughed and said, "If people knew how easy it is to move things around when someone isn't paying attention." I never reacted. I only listened. Behind the silence, I was working with Monica. We collected bank timestamps that showed when payments were rerouted. We compared old emails to altered ones that had been sent in my name. We traced where notices had been redirected. Every small detail formed a line back to Denise. Then something even more important appeared. A former bank assistant contacted Monica. He remembered being asked to process unusual changes. He remembered the name. He remembered the urgency. Denise had spoken to him directly while I was in the hospital. He had questioned it at the time but followed instructions. I kept playing my role. The broken sister. The woman who had lost everything. Denise grew bold. She talked about renovations. About how lucky she was. About how the house was finally in the right hands. And every word she said became another piece of proof. This was no longer about hurt feelings or family pain. This was no longer about shouting or revenge and anger. It was about facts, documents, witnesses. I let Denise believe the story she wanted. Because while she thought the fight was over, I was only beginning, quietly, carefully, and without mercy. The dinner was supposed to be normal. Our parents invited everyone, said they wanted peace. I almost didn't go. But Monica told me sometimes the truth shows itself when people feel safe. Denise arrived like she always did, confident, smiling, acting like the room belonged to her. She talked about the house as if it were a prize she had earned. She thanked our parents for supporting her when things got complicated. Then she looked at me and said softly, "Not everyone can handle responsibility." I kept my eyes on my plate. Someone asked how long she had been making payments. Denise answered quickly. Then, when our uncle asked for the date, she gave a different month. Our mother asked who helped with the paperwork. Denise said no one. Later, she mentioned the bank, guiding her through everything. The stories didn't match. She laughed, tried to brush it off. But the room felt different now. People were listening more closely. Our father asked why the bank was still sending letters in my name. Denise said it was just a delay. I quietly slid one of the envelopes onto the table. No one spoke for a moment. Denise's smile tightened. She began explaining too much, speaking faster, correcting herself, then correcting herself again. Each answer made the last one weaker. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at her for long. I let her talk. And with every sentence, the version of reality she had built started to crack. I could see it in my mother's eyes, in the way my father stopped eating, in the silence that followed Denise's words. For the first time, I wasn't the one being questioned. She was. I realized something that night. I didn't need to fight. All I had to do was stay still and let the truth come out on its own. The final meeting with the bank was quiet. No raised voices. No drama. Just facts placed in order. Monica sat beside me, calm as always, while Harold reviewed the documents one last time. The forged forms. The altered emails. The witness statement. Every piece fit together. Then he looked at me and said, "The house is legally yours again." My hands went cold, then warm. My name was restored on the mortgage. The account was corrected. The record was cleaned. On paper, it was as if the theft had never happened. Denise didn't know. While she picked paint colors and replaced windows, the house had already come back to me. While she talked about how much she had invested, the bank had returned control to the person who had never lost it in the first place. I didn't go there. I didn't warn her. I didn't send a message. I let the silence do the work. Monica explained that everything was now documented. Any money Denise spent was her choice. Any changes she made were on a property that no longer belonged to her. Legally, she had no claim. For the first time in months, I felt something I had forgotten. Stability. I walked outside the bank into the sunlight and stood there for a moment, breathing in air that felt lighter. The fear that had lived in my chest for so long was finally loosening. Denise thought she was building a future. But the truth was already written. The house was back in my name. My life was back in my hands. And the balance between us had shifted without a single word. She never got the call. But I had already taken everything back. The papers were served on a quiet afternoon, when the beach was bright and open and there was nowhere to hide. I stood at a distance, watching from near the walkway, while the process server approached the house. Denise opened the door with the same confidence she always wore. At first she smiled. Then she saw the envelope. Her face changed. She read the first page once. Then again. Her voice rose, sharp and shaking. People nearby turned their heads. She demanded explanations. She said there had to be a mistake. She said the house was hers. The server stayed calm. He explained the documents in clear words. Eviction. Fraud. Unauthorized control. Every sentence landed like a blow. Denise's hands trembled. She looked around, searching for support, for someone to tell her this wasn't real. When she saw me standing there, her eyes filled with anger. She rushed toward me, shouting that I had betrayed her. That I was cruel. That I had ruined her life. Then, without meaning to, she said the truth. "I only moved things because you weren't paying," she cried. "You were sick. You weren't answering. Someone had to take over. Someone. Not the owner. Not the person on the mortgage. Herself." The words hung in the air between us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Everything that mattered was already written on those pages. Denise kept talking, explaining, justifying, breaking apart in front of strangers. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to calm her. I didn't try to save her from consequences. I simply watched. Not with anger. With clarity. The house was no longer a question. And neither was who she had always been. I moved back into the house on a quiet morning. There was no music. No celebration. Just the sound of the ocean and the door opening with my key. The rooms felt different. Empty in places. Marked by someone else's choices. But they were mine again. Not because I fought loudly. Not because I begged. Because I followed the truth all the way to the end. Denise was gone. The legal process moved forward without drama. Our family stopped calling her for advice. The same people who once told me to let it go now avoided talking about what she had done. No one apologized. But they didn't need to. I finally understood something important. Closure does not always come from others. It comes from standing where you belong and knowing you earned the right to be there. I walked through each room slowly. The place where my photos once hung. The window where I used to watch storms roll in. I did not feel victory. I felt something stronger. Ownership. Not just of the house. Of my choices. Of my future. Of the parts of myself I had given away for years to keep peace. Denise didn't just take my property. She took my confidence. My voice. My sense of safety. And I took all of that back. I no longer needed approval. I no longer needed to be understood. I had learned to trust what I saw, what I felt, and what I knew to be right. The betrayal began in this house. But it ended here too. This time I wasn't leaving. And the power no longer belonged to anyone but me. If this story moved you, remember. Protect your documents, question sudden changes, and never ignore what feels wrong. Financial control is part of personal safety. Share this story with someone who needs strength, and support our channel by liking, subscribing, and staying informed, because knowledge is the first step to self-protection.